All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Chronicles of a Virgo Podcast. And as usual, I'm your favorite Virgo host, Shakita Johnson. And today we are joined by the lovely Virgo bestie, Miss Jessica. How are you doing today, sis?
I'm doing all right, doing all right.
Awesome. It's a nice, bright, sunny day here. And I would say the DMV, but at least Baltimore, we stand alone up here.
And
Nice, sunny.
we've never really recorded in the daytime, so you get some natural sunlight, and
Yeah. Have we not? I think maybe like later in the evening when the sun's going down. So yes, you're right. This is like a bright, sunny day. We're recording this episode. So we both got refreshing nights of sleep, I hope. And we're gonna have this lovely conversation. But before we get into our conversation, we have to do our mental health check. So if you are listening for the first time, we rate our mental health on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being that you're in a good space, one being you're not in the best space, you're managing, there is some room for pouring, but you are doing okay. So, Jess, how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 5?
I would say a 5. I'm a little tired, but at the same token, I feel like we got the sunshine that definitely helps. Just seeing the sun and like it's not being all dreary and rainy like it's been recently. I feel like I've been so drowsy throughout the whole week because of the rain. But no, I would say I'm, at a 5 and just ready for spring and renewal and just, you know, fun.
Yes, yes, and no to the rain and the freaking wind. Like the last couple of days have been so weird weather-wise, and like my body and energy has been reflecting that. Like yesterday, which was Saturday, so we're recording this episode on a Sunday. I canceled all my plans yesterday. Shout out to Janelle for being so understanding, supportive. But it was like I needed to just listen to my body, and she did too. So I couch surfed on my own couch watching movies. Well, the movies end up watching me, but I just like chilled. And somehow I mistakenly turned the network off on my phone. Whole nother story. So like nothing was really coming in until I turned it back on. So I'm like, maybe that was just like the universe, like making sure I was at peace and like off my phone and just
Hmm.
vibing. Then I get back on the internet this morning and be like, oh my gosh, there's more rat beefs. Like, what the heck done happened in like the last 24 hours?
Child.
But yes, I am so for the sun and official spring, hopefully soon. Um, so my mental health on a scale of 1 to 5, I'm going to say that I am probably at like a 4.5, 5-ish. Um, just because like I'm still trying, like my body is still transitioning through that phase of, I've been in training for this new job and listen, 5 o'clock Friday came and I could not have been so much more happier, like to just be done. Done for the week. I took my last big test last Friday and I passed it. Like, I have the worst test anxiety ever. And I've been testing for 2 weeks straight. And next week, which starts tomorrow, I move into a different phase of training. I'm like, Lord, please no more tests. Like, I don't want it. So like, yeah, I'm like at a 4.5, 5. My mind is in a good space. I'm feeling good, but I would be even better if the weather continues to be consistent with the sun and warmness. But again, yes, I do these mental health checks as a way to hold myself accountable, to check in, see how I'm feeling, as well as hold my guests and listeners accountable to make sure you're checking in with yourself, having that inner dialogue, even if it's just for a few minutes of a day, to just make sure you're doing well. And if you're not, try to find out what the root cause is and do something proactive, healthy, meaningful to help pull you out of that whole feeling. All right. So, sis, thank you so much for participating.
Hmm.
And it's so funny because like this morning my cousin tweeted something about like there being like a shift in the energy for like positive things. She said, make sure y'all wear something very colorful and bright. And I looked down like, well, listen, this all you gonna so got my black on today as usual. Okay. So let's get into this conversation. So, with it still being Sexual Assault Awareness Month, I wanted to hold a discussion, a more of a educational discussion, not just for survivors of sexual assault awareness or survivors of some type of traumatic experience, but everyone. A conversation about prevention, consent, boundaries, and all these different factors that fall underneath of that. Because in my personal life, what I realized recently having these conversations with people is a lot of people are just waking up to realizing that they may have been victimized at some point and not known because they don't know all these different factors that can potentially fall underneath each of these umbrellas of things, or they may have been the one causing people to feel uncomfortable by doing some of these things. So I wanted to have this conversation so we all can like take a look at ourselves, our own actions and things, as well as continue to promote these things and promote people to talk about these things and maybe address them. So the first thing that I wanted to start out with is talking about consent and boundaries. Okay. So I went to our good old sis Google and I pulled the lovely definitions because again, we may think that we know what things are and what they truly mean, but then when we see the definition or hear it, it may resonate with us a lot differently. And doing my little research and things, a lot of these things definitely did resonate with me a little differently. So, according to Google, consent is when one person agrees to give or give someone permission to do something. Consent means agreeing to an action based on your knowledge of what that action involves. Okay, so keep that in mind. And it's likely consequences in having the option to say no, right? And it also paraphrases the absence of no. Hear me loud and clear. The absence of no does not mean yes. All right. So that is the definition for consent. And the definition for boundaries, personal boundaries, and I'm going to use personal boundaries because that's what we're specifically referring to. Personal boundaries are guidelines, rules, or limits, okay, that a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to behave towards them and how they will respond when someone passes those limits. All right. So again, like I said, that may be those two definitions may be things that you're saying like, oh, I already knew this and whatever. And that's perfectly fine. But I guarantee you someone didn't look at those things like you did. So now moving forward, I want to focus this part of the conversation on why it is important to have consent in different relationship dynamics and to have boundaries in relationship dynamics. So, Jess, why do you think or why do you know that it's important to have proper consent in regards to in relationship environments?
Um, well, A, you shouldn't assume anything, no matter what the situation, no matter how often you may have interacted with somebody, no matter how long you may have known somebody, you should never assume. Just because I may have been comfortable with something yesterday does not mean I'm comfortable with it today, and vice versa. I shouldn't assume it about you either. Um, you are responsible for articulating what you do and don't want, what you do and don't like. Don't put that power in somebody else's hand. Don't allow people to make that decision for you because chances are they're going to make the wrong decision for you, you know. And to me, that's the only way you can confidently um, move forward with somebody is by giving consent for X, Y, and Z. Of course, there's a lot of things you can give consent for. So, of course, when you think about relationships, people typically think about very specific things, but I think that's a part of the point of the conversation is that you can apply that to so many different things. So you got to take it out of the context of it just being like romantic or sexual, and it's a lot of different things that can apply to.
Most definitely. And you if you bringing up just the whole sexual aspect and romantic, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. So, because I was talking to a friend a couple weeks ago, and we were talking. This topic has just been like roaming around, evidently. Like with things in the news and social media, I feel like at least for me, my circle and other people I talk to on a daily basis have really been talking about a lot of these different things. Because again, a lot of people are waking up to experiences that they have unfortunately been a part of. And I was talking to my friend, and we were talking about drinking, like being under the influence and having sex. And I think at one point in our life, maybe we used to think that it was cool to get drunk and then go have intercourse, or people that would smoke like weed or do some type of drug, but that was just like a natural thing that people would do, and it was just so much fun. And hey, I'm not like, shaming anybody, whatever. But the reality side of that is there still has to be full verbal consent before those things are done. And if not, someone in that interaction risk the chance of potentially being maybe charged with something that they had no, that wasn't the plan. For example, this example I gave my friend, I'm like, hey, if me and you go out drinking, which occasionally we do, we go outside, we have fun, whatever, and we go back to your house and we have intercourse or whatever the case may be, because at that point you just, how doing adulting things. I I said like I could wake up the next morning and go file charges and say this, hey, this person did this to me, I did not consent to this. And you will come back and say, no, you did. Last night we were drunk and we did this. And the mere fact of me being drunk equals impairment. It would be your word against mine, you know what I'm saying? So, I found this nice write up on the University of Tulsa that talks about alcohol and consent. And one of the main factors is consent has to be specific. Like it has to be verbalized and it has to be specific to what the person will allow and maybe what they won't allow. And under the influence of alcohol or any other type of drug, there still has to be consent. And if, let's say, consent is given and one of those parties maybe passes out during the time of the activity, if the other party continues to participate, then that is a form of rape. That is a form of rape. And I'm pretty sure by now a lot of people have seen, Law and Order SVU, and you've seen examples of these things play out on that show as well. So you just have to be very, very careful. Be very, very careful when you are mixing like substances into just fun. And I can't believe at my big age now that I'm saying this, but I'm glad that I am, because when I was younger, these were things that I was not thinking about. My friends, we were not talking about. We were just living life so freely, just doing whatever. But now, like, more conversations need to be had like this. And because of my own trauma and other things that I've been through, I want to continue to like hold spaces maybe to talk about these things, to encourage other people to like, hey, just be careful, be mindful, Um, and also consent needs to be clear. Okay. So like Jess said, like no is literally a full sentence. If a person says no, then there's no X, Y, and Z. There is no trying to persuade them, because moving into a persuasive conversation, that is another form of assault. And that's called coercion. Okay. So is there anything else you want to say about that consent topic before I jump to the coercion?
Yeah, and sorry if it's some noise in the background. That's like a motorcycle going down the street, and you got to be revving the engine doing the most.
Girl, I thought it
But
was that
anyway,
car. That car.
yeah. But no, this is what's so crazy. It's crazy how in a situation where somebody can feel comfortable about one thing, but uncomfortable about something else, but you'd be like, hold up, that don't even add up. So, granted, what we were just talking about, the fact that we can be so comfortable sharing our bodies with somebody or whatever the case might be, but too uncomfortable to ask for consent. So, I
Mhm.
just needed to say that because I feel like people think it's awkward,
Mhm.
or they feel like maybe they are dampening the mood or, messing up the moment. But it's like you are better off taking that minute to just, make sure y'all on the same page versus things go down and then, like you said, tomorrow it's a whole nother story. So, like I said, you can't be so comfortable sharing your body with somebody, and that can have so many consequences, but you're not comfortable enough to just get consent. So
Definitely. And listen, we're women. Like we have lived 30 plus years, right? We've been in environments where we have people have really tried to push us to do things that may seem uncomfortable. And unfortunately, we may have, did those uncomfortable things because we want this person to really like us, or we want to be in the in crowd. and we want to have this maybe a certain persona that like, oh, she's down for nothing, down for anything. And I know a lot of people like that, or that was like that, not thinking that, oh, like this is like, manipulation and abuse tactics. So I think it's important that you like realize and acknowledge those things now and be like, you know what? Like if I say no, that's just what I mean. And that's what I talked about moving into like people trying to like really push, 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 and push. And it's just to satisfy their needs or their wants at that point, and it's like they are really not even being mindful of what your boundaries are, or maybe what traumas or experiences you have that make you say no or make you have certain boundaries in place. So that's why I was talking about coercion. And I want to play a video because I got a video. And I know that you guys will hear it because let's see. Ooh, let's go. If you say no, first 10 minutes, 20 minutes, I don't care if you said no for the first 2 seconds. You may know. If you felt so pressured into finally just saying, okay, yeah, fine, let's do it, that's coercion, and you are a victim. Okay? So I don't care if you said no for the first 3 seconds. No means no. Get the hell back the hell up, back the fuck up. What are we doing? Well, I know what you're trying to do. No, thank you. So ladies, always be mindful of certain situations you can put yourself in because the world we live in, you cannot trust certain men. So if you a certain age, you get invited to a hotel party. I know y'all be young, y'all be, hey, I finna go. Make sure you got friends that you trust around you at these hotel parties. Make sure you not. All right, so I'll play. So what I only thing that I slightly want to add to what she said, because everything she said is definitely true, but that can go both ways for girls, ladies and men. Right. So I came across that video on TikTok, and of course I'm like, yes, I love this, especially the person that's saying it because she normally don't say things like that all the time. But what struck me was the comments. Like the comments were just, it really made me feel sad because there are almost like 1,500 comments, and the majority of these comments there are women saying that like, looking back, I gave in so many times. This was the worst feeling ever in my life. This hurts so bad at my age, realizing this was me. Someone said we all have a story. And I mean, it just goes on. People saying that like this was them realizing that their boyfriends or their baby fathers did this to them. And I'm stuck with this person for the rest of my life now because I got their kids, you know? And that's what I was saying earlier about how like we think sometimes that we know what things are. And I think a lot of times we get lost in translation thinking it could or would never happen to us until we hear it maybe like a different way. And we're like, oh man, like well, I had a similar situation. So maybe this really did happen to me, you know? And like she said, it's very important to have people around you that you can trust. But I think also on the caveat to that is sometimes people that you can trust are not always the most people worthy of your trust, you know?
Right.
And again, social media and society has shown us numerous situations where people have gone on these trips and they have been friends for years, and then that person ended up not coming back because they were killed or just something. So I felt like that clip was really important because have we ever been coerced to do things that we did not want to do?
I mean, of course. I'm pretty sure at some time or another, every young lady or every lady in general can probably say yes to that. Now, it may be different levels to that. And I guess I kind of want to reference what she's saying about being a victim. I do kind of want to be careful about that only because sometimes when you assess your own situations, sometimes you could have stuck to your boundary and you chose not to. You know what I
Mhm,
mean? So not every situation is a victim type of, outcome, I guess you can say, just because you gave in.
mhm,
But it's still something to consider as far as, how often is my significant other trying to get me to do something that maybe in the moment I don't feel like doing. not in a fearful type of situation, because like that's a whole nother story, obviously, not in a outright force type of situation, but just like, damn, like just leave me be, because like people will use things against you. Like if somebody knows, okay, if I do X, Y, and Z on top of asking her, eventually she's going to say yes, you know, and it's like I said, it may not be maliciousness or, you know what I mean, behind that. But at the same token, it's like, why does it feel necessary to have to keep poking the bear, I guess you can say,
Mhm.
for me to give in versus just letting me be in the state that I'm in that moment, which is not right now. And then, when I come around to it, then we both on the same page. So I'm pretty sure all of us have been in some situation, one way or the other, where we felt coerced.
Yeah, and no one's exempt from this, right? Whether you are a single person, you're in a relationship, or even if you are married, because there is a law, just like the whole drinking by impairment, you can't consent and all those different things. Like there is a law called I know I'm about to say this wrong. What does it say, it, Jess?
Was it marital something?
Marital, yes. Because I don't know why I kept wanting to say Marshall. I don't know why. That's how it looked to me on paper. I don't know. But marital rape, that is what it is called. Um, and it's a real thing. I really encourage you all to look that up for whatever state or country or whatever you may be living in. I only looked up the facts for the state of Maryland because that's where I live at. And if convicted and sentenced in the state of Maryland for that, you can get up to 25 years. Okay. So they do have some type of, protection for married couples and people that are in relationships, because I think a lot of people think, well, like, when I'm married, it's just whatever. Like when I want it, I'm supposed to get it and you're supposed to give it up. And that's not the case. And you can be coerced to do things, but it still falls under that marital rape category. So that's just something to like think about. And again, educate yourself on it. Maybe talk to your spouse if you feel like this has happened. Hopefully, no one has ever dealt with that. I really hope no one has ever dealt with a lot of these things. But the unfortunate reality is some of us have, you know. And then with consent, right, we have boundaries. So I think boundaries is like is hard though, right? Because it's like, especially when you're aging and you're just going through different phases in life. And I feel like for me personally, I have changed my boundaries so many times because I didn't necessarily have boundaries. And I was just like this free for all, maybe like a free for all spirited person. Um, boundaries really didn't, some boundaries did not exist. Um, but what I will say is like in intimate spaces or whatever, just to let you in my business a little bit. There's this thing I used to do or whatever, and I didn't realize until later in life that it was actually putting up a boundary when I was in intimate spaces with people. But I did have like do not do's, like, hey, like, I don't like these things, like don't do this and all these other factors. And for me, that list of things came from my sexual abuse and my trauma and why I didn't want certain things done. I know some people in that aspect, you're down for you're down for anything and you may like little kinks. And I mean, hey, that's your prerogative. But some people really do have things that they don't like. And that's boundaries that I think everyone should be able to put in place and people should just respect that. But again, unfortunately, everyone doesn't see it that way and people don't understand why it's important to have boundaries.
No, definitely. And I feel like boundaries, they get developed through experience. You know what I mean? Like, of course, there are general things that maybe we get taught as kids, as far as boundaries, like respecting people's space and asking to, do certain things, X, Y, Z. But even those general boundaries that we may be taught as children, as adults, or as we grow older, we might choose to change those boundaries because we may be more comfortable with things that other people aren't comfortable with and vice versa. You know what I mean? So even those quote unquote universal boundaries may not even stick true for us personally as we go through life because we're all different people. But once again, my point is experience typically shapes your boundaries.
Mhm. Not only that, like, we always say, like, we teach people how to treat us, and I feel like and again, I'm speaking from, like, my past experiences, like, being that person that did not have boundaries, that let people do and say whatever, it established something in their mind that I can continue to do these things because she didn't
Mhm.
say stop. Like, she didn't say, like, "No, don't touch me, don't do this, don't do that." And now that I'm in the space, the more healed and awakened space that I am in, I'm able and I have been able to set boundaries and really stand firm on them. And it's always a red flag to me when someone questions a boundary. And I'll give you a lovely example, letting you in my business a little more. Okay. Um, before I left, and just know where it's about to go, before I left my last job, um, there was a guy there that, in the beginning, the conversation was good. It was just like real friendly, like hi and bye, how you doing, blah 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 blah. But it was like really the gesture was so friendly. It wasn't no like making me feel uncomfortable coming on to you. And it was just like one of those things like we see each other in passing and we would converse briefly. And the last couple weeks that I was there, mind you, I had seen this person so many times, but the last couple weeks that I was there before I left, then it came out that this person had like a interest in me that I did not have for this person, nor did I like seek anything. I didn't have any mixed signs, like it was none of that. And when I explain numerous times to this person like, "Hey, that's not where I'm at. I understand and appreciate that you've been able to communicate these things, but this is not what it is. This is what it is." There was also a boundary put in place about physical touch, like, "No, you cannot touch me without my permission. You even if it's just a hug, like you have to ask, can I give you a hug?" You know what I'm saying? There was so much resistance and pushback to why I felt how I felt and why was I being so difficult and why was I being so direct. And I've never had a person like really I have, but to this extent, I've never had a person question me like that. I'm just like, wow, like you are questioning why you can't hug me without asking me, like, because you're still touching my body. You know what I'm saying? So you should anybody, you should ask like, "Hey, is it okay for us I mean, to have a hug?" Like, however you word it. And it was just like, I don't know, the person got truly upset, and it was just a lot of persuading being done to try to manipulate me into dropping my boundaries, letting my guard up, and allowing this person to do and say all these different things. And I didn't allow it, and for better words, I was like, "Hey, you just need to probably just, leave me the fuck alone because otherwise someone is going to get hurt out of this and it's going to be one of them situations where all of this could have been prevented, you know? And that's why I think it's important to be direct, to be clear, to be specific in your boundaries and in giving consent to what people can do and what they cannot do. Because had I not done that, now, did I give in and allow the person to hug me? Yes, unfortunately, I did because it became that annoying in a sense, and I couldn't get the person to leave me alone. I felt like, hey, maybe if I give let this person give me a half a hug, this person will leave me alone. And it didn't. He didn't. But overall, I shouldn't have even had been in that position where I felt like I had to give in. And unfortunately, so many people are in or are in or have been in situations where they felt like they had to give in to a person and do what this person wanted them to do because maybe if I do this one time, they will be okay and satisfied and they will leave me alone. But then unfortunately, sometimes that just heightens people's
Mm. 'Cause it's never that one time, you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't have to bargain with your comfort. You shouldn't have to bargain with your security in XYZ. And unfortunately, given in that one time, in that moment, it kind of makes us feel like we're off the hook. But then that fed that person something. So now that they have been fed, now they try to find other ways to,
Mhm,
cross our boundaries or whatever their agenda is. They're trying to satisfy their agenda. Definitely in your case, that's somebody that you were familiar with, but essentially they were a stranger. So
mhm.
to me, that's a big red flag. Like as a stranger, why do you feel like I have to explain my boundaries to you?
Mhm.
Like that'd be one thing if it's somebody like you legit knew. And once again, it's not about having to explain your boundaries, but if you know somebody and they are so used to you being and operating in one way, if you change your boundaries, and obviously that might be a shock to somebody. So it's like, I don't mind explaining that to somebody, that I have a close relationship with. But should I have to keep explaining it or keep, having the expectation of whatever? It's like, no, this is what it is. Now that you know, operate with that understanding. If you can't respect my boundary, then it is what it is. And I think that's a part of the problem too. We may create and have a boundary, assert the boundary, but because of how other people react to it, we then fall back on our own boundary. We break our own boundaries sometimes.
Mhm. And it should not have to be like that, and it's so funny because like you said, like, you giving in, satisfy whatever weird craving or whatever that person wanted, and I knew in that moment it did for that person, like, it gave them a boost, but then still in my mind, I was like, "This is still not going anywhere." I needed him to leave me alone. And this person was a person of power, so that goes into a whole nother realm and speaking in, like, environments of work, right? And then after it was done, the person said, "Finally, I felt like I was begging you." And I said, FYI, moving forward in your life, if you feel like you are begging a person for parts of them or something of them, please know that that is a form of coercion and it may be um uncomfortable to them for you to continue doing that, especially if they already put that boundary in place. They've already said no. You have to find it within yourself to be okay with that. Because God forbid it's a trauma victim such as myself and you trigger them. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't know what can come out of that, how they can spiral. Like you don't know. And I'm like, this is for your safety, right? This is for your safety. But it was just like duly noted, and I highly because of who this person is, I don't think they cared enough. They just thought I was being an asshole. They just thought I was being too direct. But again, you have to generalizing things in some instances can really set you up for danger or failure. And I have definitely had my share of encounters. And it's no surprise I've said on the show numerous times, like out of my intimate friend circle, I'm the more affectionate one, right? And my friends are not. Jessica would tell you, like, I'm like and always has been like the touchy feely type person, lay my head on your shoulder, a hug, I want to cuddle and nestle up with you. And they have, I guess the right word we use is like maybe like adjusted to it because they know me and they know more why I'm that way, right? But in reality, like, should I have asked or should I ask more like, hey, is it okay if I have a hug? Is it okay if I touch your shoulder? It may sound cliche, right? But generally speaking, you should ask because you are allowing that person to make that choice. You're allowing them to stand in their power and dictate what you can do to them and what you can't. And had they told me no, then I'd just be like, okay, you know, and I won't bother them. But and I think we need to not only look at our like friend circles, but like even in families, you know, you have some family members that demand hugs every time you see them, that kiss you on your cheek. I've seen relatives kiss on the lips, and for me, I cannot understand or stomach to understand like why that is a thing. The forehead kisses, and in some instances, some of these forms of affection can be innocent, but in other ways they can be intimate, right? That people have forehead kisses in intimate spaces, especially kissing on the lips, certain type of hugs, like your hands shouldn't be this below my waist, a lot of things. And again, it can be pure innocence because it can be looked at as pure innocence. Oh, it's my family, but there are still boundaries that people should be honoring. You know, just because you're my father doesn't mean you get to do this. Just because you're my mom doesn't mean you get to do or say these things. Just because you're my cousin, aunt, uncle, mama, pop, whomever does not give you the power to violate my boundaries. And those people as well should be adhering to the consent that you make. So again, that's something that I think and I would like us as a community and collective to really think about within our own circles, within our own families. And if these things may exist, they're always ugly realizations, right? But how can we make it better? Like, can we have these conversations within our families and be like, hey, let me educate you a little bit, you know? I mean, I think I've had to do it. It's not the best conversation always, but hey, as long as I'm standing 10 toes down on you gonna respect me or you just not gonna be around me, then that's just it, you know?
Right. I mean, it is what it is. Of course, your family space is typically the first place where you're going to learn a lot of these things. That's your initial classroom before you go out into the world. And then, of course, mostly what you do in your house, you do out into the world because that's where your parents or your other relatives showed you these particular practices and behaviors and stuff like that. I think the biggest downfall in a lot of families is that sense of entitlement, because you have certain relationships with people where it just seems to be entitlement to people's space and to their body and XYZ. And like we're saying, like a lot of situations are innocent in the sense that somebody is not purposely trying to do something bad or negative to somebody, but people don't even give people that space of being an individual person. No, you're just their son or their sister or your mom or your grand, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
like people think about people as far as their titles versus them being an individual human being who
Exactly.
you don't know what they got going on, you don't know what they thinking or what they do and don't like, or but then the downside of that too, and I know you could probably personally attest to this, in a family space, you can 100% be vocal and say, speak out or ask or XYZ and be ignored. So
Sorry, I
I
didn't mean
think
to
that's
laugh, but
no, I,
mhm,
I I know, So it's like that's unfortunate, but it also shapes how you look at the world because it's like, oh, if in my own family space, people are not respecting my boundaries or gaining consent from me for XYZ, is that realistic to expect people out in the world to respect my boundaries or get consent and stuff like that? So people need to think about that, put two and two together, and they do need to be comfortable with having these conversations. Like you said, maybe I got to be the black sheep, maybe I'm the only person that's going to speak up about it, but it's worth it.
yeah, and like you're honoring yourself in doing that, right? Because maybe something has made you realize like these things aren't right. And you should be the change you want to see around you. And I know that it's hard in a lot of cases because you may get pushback, you may get so much resistance, and a lot of our family members may be older and they are already stuck in their ways, stuck in their thoughts, and there's nothing that can change that. I will be okay with that, right? But I'll be more okay with the fact that I said something, like, just empowering myself to speak because unfortunately, a lot of people don't. And it's not just even, you know, I can advocate so much for like believing your children and having these type of conversations with your kids, but it's like not only having these conversations with your kids about stranger danger outside of the family, right? But these same conversations so they can realize that these things can happen in the family, in the intimate family, in the church, in the school, like overall everywhere. So like the stranger danger is not necessarily a person that you don't always know because statistics do show, and I wish I had it, that a lot of times the percentage of people that do harm children are people that they know that are close in those families and friend circles and things. So yeah, just having those conversations about boundaries and consent early on, creating the safe environment for your child or your family to communicate things that make them uncomfortable, things that may confuse them, but I don't know all the answers, but I know I can come here and get the answers that I need, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable as a person, right? Because we are not perfect beings. Sometimes we do slip up, but it's just like validating that person's feelings and experience and then trying to navigate a path of healing. And I've seen people on TikTok that have actually created different books and different things that teach kids and family about the full anatomy of a person's body and consent. Like it's amazing. Like this black lady, a lot of people created these things during COVID, and just continue to just thrive in these environments. But things like that are important And I get it. What I've realized lately, even with me talking more about my abuse and all this stuff this month specifically, I feel like it's a lot of resistance. Like people don't know how to respond. People don't know what to say. And that's perfectly fine. Like you don't have to say anything, you don't have to respond. Sometimes it's just being there, being a presence, letting that person know, like I see you, I hear you, I support you. I may not fully understand your experience and I may not understand all the different parts of it, but I do see you, and I acknowledge that something may have happened and now you're in this space, opposed to like, here we go again on social media. Like, and that's a whole nother conversation. But just getting to that point to really empower yourself to have these conversations and acknowledge that something may not be right. And having these conversations, moving towards the next topic about noticing different red flags, right? Now these can be red flags in intimate spaces when you and a spouse, someone if you're dating, red flags just with strangers again with your family. Because I feel like nobody, like nobody is off limits, right? I there's tons of red flags. The main ones that like because I don't know, I was journaling certain stuff, but the main ones that I have had experience with has been possessiveness, love bombing, isolation, gaslighting, and having controlling behavior. Like
Mhm.
anything that falls underneath the umbrella of those, and again, these are like my specifics. I'm gonna let Jess acknowledge some red flags as well. Anything that falls under those categories are red flags. And they always start off very light. Like the possessiveness, like, oh, I just want to always be around you. Like, I just love you so much. I just love your energy. I need you to come here. I need you to like, and I feel like sometimes people be so like glowy eyed and they just, okay, they just want me or this family member just want, like, that is a form of possessiveness. Like love bombing early on, making buttering you up, making you feel good, buying you all different things you never experienced. Like, and don't misconstrue the line. Some people genuinely do these things because they care and they want to continue to have your relationship and dynamics evolve. But on the flip side, right, when you're speaking about acts of a narcissism or just an abuser overall, just a person who's just a horrible person, they have a cycle of things that they do to see if they can get the individual where they need them. I've had a person tell me before that they wanted to move me away from my damn family and friends. Red flag. I'm like, why do you get mad when I'm talking on the phone or texting my family and friends? Like, why are you getting mad from sharing my location? And like, where do you think you're gonna get off about moving me somewhere I ain't never even been before? Like on an island by myself, and then I can't, socialize. Like those are all red flags. And of course, like the main ones like physical and mental emotional signs of abuse. But again, I understand that everyone don't know how to um acknowledge those things, that this could be what's going on. Or you may not have ever had a situation with it. So you don't know that, you're a victim of any of these things. So
Mhm.
what's some red flags to you that stands out when dealing with just like, people?
Um, I would say guilt tripping.
Mhm.
People trying to like make you feel guilty about things that you shouldn't be feeling guilty about, but then for some reason we feel like now we got to explain stuff that we don't have to explain. Um, People making you feel like you have to prove something to them
Mhm.
when once again, I don't have to do anything but stay black and die. So no. Um, And once again, what I may have felt yesterday, I may not feel today, and I have that right. Long as I'm not leading you on and manipulating you, like I have the right to change my mind. I have the right to feel different. Everybody does.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of going back to what you said about isolative behaviors, but I'm just thinking about it from a different standpoint, like more of a general standpoint.
Mhm.
I know we talked about the example of before, like if you're like out somewhere, whether it's like a public space or an event or something like that, and somebody that maybe you don't know or you're not comfortable with maybe wants to get you into a different space with less people, less eyes on you. Like, yes, in the general sense, We get it. Could be a loud environment. Maybe y'all trying to talk, you can't hear. But point blank, if you don't feel comfortable, if the person is just very insistent on trying to isolate you or get you into a private space, then that could be something to obviously be on the lookout for. Um, and what else? 'Cause like I said, it's so many when
Mhm.
you get down to it. Um, so I actually hadn't thought about this before. I'm really just thinking about it right now. Sometimes people will, and it's kind of going back to what you said about buttering up, but I'm thinking about it in a very specific way. Sometimes people will appear vulnerable to you, but it's false vulnerability.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that what they're telling you isn't necessarily real,
Mhm.
but they don't the connection that they're trying to create is not a real connection. It's more
Mm.
so, let me appear that I'm letting my defenses down so I can get that person to let their defense down.
Mm, that's a
You know,
good one.
so maybe I'll just share something random to you where you're kind of like, oh, like, oh, thank you for telling me that. But it kind of puts you in that same space, that same soft space to like open up to make you feel like you're creating a bond, but it's really a manipulation tactic. So I'm not saying that to say that every time somebody tell you something intimate or vulnerable that they're trying to manipulate you. It's just that you just gotta, be aware to see like, you know,
Have discernment.
right.
Yeah, and I listen to I'm very detail oriented. So like when people tell me things, like I listen, especially like something like that, I listen to details because and I'm not saying that details can't change, right? Especially dealing with people that have really dealt with some like something impactful, some serious trauma. It is like a feather. Okay, there you go. Something impactful. So sometimes there may be add-ons to their story. That is a real thing. Sometimes, a lot of times when dealing with like trauma victims, we dissociate. So there may have been a time where we were being traumatized or whatever the case is, and we have tried to find a way to like erase that from memory. And then later on in life, it may pop back up like, oh my God, like this also happened too. So things can be added to a story. It doesn't make it unbelievable doesn't mean that it's not true or whatever. But if I'm listening to this person's story, they're taking their guard down, they seem like, oh, like they are just been through the most. And now like different things are starting to change. I thought you said your mother was the one. Now you said it was your grandmother, so it was both of them. Oh no, no. What I meant was, you know what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
you just gotta and I know it's hard to remember everything that people tell you, or also like see how much a person is actually talking. Like I know y'all, and we talked about it a couple months ago, the Risa Tisa, the whole legion guy that she was dating. One thing that she said about him is like he talked her so much. And it was kind of like so she could not keep up with the things that he was saying. And like her mind was at one point like spinning. So that's when she started recording things on her phone. Cause like, I know he said this, but this doesn't seem right. But I'm gonna give him benefit of doubt. And I mean that's a whole nother experience. But some people will talk you in circles so you won't remember different parts of this story. And you're like, well, you know what? Damn, I don't even know what to think at this point. I'ma just whatever. So I think that's something to look out for as well. And again, there's so many different red flags. My intuition and try and really being having strong discernment has now in my life, I swear I wish I had it back then. Like I swear I wish I had it back then just because I wouldn't have been so open and vulnerable to a lot of treatment, a lot of people. Maybe I wouldn't have attracted a lot of situations to me. Maybe I would have made better judgment calls. And I didn't. And that's okay. I've learned from all those things. I've healed them or I am healing them now. But if I can speak on certain stuff or give other examples just as well to like kind of prevent them things from happening again to a myself or someone else, then hey, let's do it, Because again,
Hmm.
some of these things during this conversation that was thrown out might have been things that you have experienced or experiencing and you didn't look at it how it truly is. So maybe this will give you a different outlook of some of these keys and things to prevention and safety. That's what it is. um, so yeah, and it was one other thing that I wanted to talk about before we get out of here, and it was actually from a podcast. Shout out to the fellas from the League of Kings
Hey,
podcast.
fellas. Mhm.
So I did get permission to speak on this from Willie. So thank you so much, Willie. The League of Kings podcast is an amazing show. Four hosts, Willie, J Dot, the resident Big Brother, and Joe. And they all have their own individual podcasts as well. And they talk about different things. But on the League of Kings, they come together and they talk about topics that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about, because sometimes I'm listening, I'm like, wow, I've never heard this anywhere else. Then they talk about things that really make you think. They talk about health, mental health, and things that are from men of color perspective, right? And a couple episodes back, I believe it was Resident Big Brother had shared about a conversation he was having with I believe it was a female friend of his or something, in regards to the stigma around um I guess sexual harassment in the workplace, like men versus women. And it really first when he first started, I was like, oh gosh, like how is this gonna go? Because I feel like men and women are perceived differently, in work environments, but when it comes to sexual assault or any type of sexual violation, anything, men and women are always going to be perceived differently, right? And it raised some question marks in me, because I'm like, I would be curious to know how many male counterparts I've worked with that have been sexually harassed in work and haven't said nothing because it was done by a female and they felt like they was not going to believe, or how many women have been like have allowed a man to make a sexual pass, or inappropriate pass at them, just because, oh, that's just Joe, we play like that all the time, but in reality it was inappropriateness.
Or how
Does
you have
that
like
make
these work husbands, work wives. That's a whole nother element.
Yeah, so it really made me think, like, how do people really perceive the dynamics at work? Like, and we talked about this before. There's a lot of people that be like, no one at work is your friend. You can never make you can never make friends at work. And I would like to say, all my best friends, I met them at work. Like, we've all worked together, right? But then on the other half, I'm like, yeah, you need to use your best judgment and your discernment about who you share things with and how close you get to people. But when it comes to that physicalness and the inappropriateness, I don't think that that's something that you should just do with you shouldn't do it probably at all
Mhm.
at work, but does it happen? Yes. you know and then, like, how is a person supposed to respond in a situation like that? Like, have you ever dealt with anything like that in a work environment before?
Not as far as like harassment per se. Now, have men definitely hit on me that I had no interest in? Yeah, I mean that's happened my whole work history. I've been working since I was 18, and I worked at different places. So I feel like in every work environment, somebody was attracted enough to me to say something. You know what I mean? To like, shoot their shot or whatever. Um, I so I won't. Okay, no, I just thought about something. That's something just came to my mind. So at my current job, and this was a couple years ago, and to me, it has nothing to do with like us working in different positions as far as like my interests or whatever. Like point blank, period. I'm just not interested in dealing with anybody that I work with in my work environment. I did that once when I was working at a different job, and it didn't turn out bad as far as the work environment. It just simply didn't work out. But we were cool. But anywho, in this particular example, it was a young guy, and this is another thing too. He was significantly younger than me, and I know, I look young. I am young, but like, most people think I'm younger than what I am. So that kind of plays a part in kind of my whole perception of the whole situation too. Cause it's like, if you don't go take your little young ass somewhere. But anyway,
Yes.
so this is when I still was working on the units. So I wasn't like even off the unit at this point. So this young guy who worked in like environmental services, when I say like every single time he saw me, he had a comment. And it's just like, sir. And you know how sometimes like you can have that initial interaction with somebody and it's like, all right, this ain't it. But then maybe y'all can become cool, you
Yeah.
whatever. Like, no, it's like every single time he saw me, he had to like try his luck. Like every single time. And it's just like, At this point, you're annoying. Like, of course, I didn't feel like threatened or like fear. It was nothing like that. But it
Mhm.
was just annoying because, like, hey, I
Right.
already told you no the first time.
So you did put a boundary in place.
Yes, like
Okay.
from the jump. Like there was no like plan. There was no like me laughing it off. It was just like, no, like I'm not interested. Point blank period. And then at some point I made it like apparent that there was a significant age difference. So it's like because of that alone, like if we met on the street, I wouldn't be interested. You know what I mean? So it's just like, nah. But it's like that went on like the whole rest of his time working there. And then like one day he just wasn't there no more. So I guess he moved on. But it was just like, who wants to put up with that every day? Like, yes, it didn't go so far to where he was like, he was doing enough, but he wasn't doing the most. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But it's just like you don't point blank, you don't feel like I'm not the type of person who craves attention. So like some people will play into it just for like the attention factor of it. And I think that goes into like a part of the bigger conversation we're having is because something that is technically inappropriate can keep going, 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 going because you're feeding off the attention.
Yes.
So it's like people gotta, sometimes you're playing with fire in those types of situations because you may be taking it one way, like, oh, it's innocent, it's harmless, but that person who's pursuing you, may have a whole different story in their head, in the work environment, and then that can spiral out of control. And that
Mhm.
used to be some crazy stuff going
Mhm.
on at the job with some other people
Mhm.
that like spilled over, into like the public versus like just whispers or versus people just private situations. It's like, no, it's spilling over into the units now. Like people coming on to this unit to confront this person and da da. I'm just like, what in the world? Like,
Stuff that
but
probably
what
could have been prevented from the jump.
prevent it for multiple reasons though.
Yeah.
A people a lot of people in the workplace, like, yes, you definitely have some predatory people. We know that 100%. And it doesn't even just have to be the boss that's predatory. Anybody can be predatory, you
Right.
know. But you have a lot of situations where it's hookup culture. You know what I mean? So it's like people are just hooking up, it's not serious, but depending on the dynamics of the circumstance, you got the one person who may be taking it more serious than the other person, and then you got people who aren't mature enough to know how to handle that in general, but especially in that type of environment.
Mhm.
And then it affects their work life. And then you got rumors going on, you got
Mhm.
people potentially getting fired and XYZ, and it's just a mess.
And you know what? That just reminded me of something. So like my last job, like it was around when I like first like around the time when I first started before my initial company was acquired by my current company or whatever. There was this guy that was in a total different department and he was like very friendly. He was friendly to everybody. A lot of people like really like you can tell when he would speak to certain women, they would just like, oh my God, they would just like blush and glow. And I'm just like, I mean, he all right, at this point in me meeting him, I was engaged. So it was you know how it is like when you in serious relationships, you don't pay nobody no mind. But for some reason, it seemed like everybody wants you when you engage and all that other stuff, or you in a relationship. But like, so I used to like speak to him in passing once again because he was just friendly. And like I said, I'm like, oh, he's been there for a year, so he kind of got a good reputation. And we used to communicate through Skype before we had transitioned to Teams. So like, you can talk to your like department or whatever. And the first red flag, but again, sometimes red flags to me back then were green flags was when he found me on Skype. Cause I'm like, how do you know my name? Like and like either my first or last name, but you found me, so hey, what's up? Whatever. So it was just like, general conversation. I didn't know anything about him until I mentioned it to my one friend, like, yeah, he's super friendly. Like, who is he? And she was just like, look him up. And I'm like, I did, like, we on the computer. She was like, no. And I hate to laugh because I didn't understand what she meant. She's like, no, look him up. So if you live in Maryland, you already know what look him up means. So I went
Mm-mm.
to K search. He had domestic violence, sexual assault, like he had a background. And I was like, how the fuck did he get this job? And he was a vet too. So I'm like so confused at this point. And my friend shared with me some stuff that she personally knew that he had done to someone else. And I was just like, ever since then, seeing him, I was just like, God, please remove this person from any aspect around me. Like, I don't want to come in contact with him, like in passing and speaking, because I'm not going to ask him, like, yo, hey, I pulled your freaking Maryland case search and I see this only from Maryland. Like, I didn't even think to look anywhere else. But, like, who wants to see that at somebody that A works at the job? So, like you said, people can have past and outside lives that you don't really know about. And had it not been for me, to tell my friend, my coworker, like, yes, he's starting to like really talk to me and engage in conversation, and her not to say, look him up. I would have never looked that man up because I'm not looking to pursue anything with you. We
Right.
we work together. We're in different departments, but like you come up here for meetings and different things. So like I want to continue to have like a pleasant relationship and rapport with you. But after I saw that, I was just like, and then COVID happened. So like I ain't see nobody yet, But like you just have to be careful when dealing with people in those spaces.
Mhm.
And had I not did any of that, telling my friend or whatever, who knows what he could have did or said to me, And it's like, would I have had the would I have had the courage to like tell my supervisors, like, hey, this person did this, and then flipping the script if it was a man, like like on the podcast, the League of Kings they were talking about, would a man have had the courage to go to his supervisor? Maybe it is the supervisor that's making the passes. Would you have the courage to go above that person's head or to HR and be like, hey, so and so is doing these things to me, or she's saying these
Mhm.
things to me, or he's doing X, Y, and Z and saying these things. And the reality is a lot of people don't.
And not everybody's in a situation to just find another job or whatever the case might be. Like we know how the job market is nowadays, so it's not that easy. Or people just got situations at home where you can't just
Yeah.
you can't afford to like not be working. So like you may be forced to be in an uncomfortable environment, until the situation resolves, if it does resolve itself.
And like you said, because one of the gentlemen on the show was saying something like, if the guy was making and I believe so, fellas, if you listening and I get this wrong, please don't charge it to me. But I believe I heard an example used of if a man is making, technically inappropriate passes at that woman and she likes him, she will let those things slide because she likes him. But if it's a man doing it and she doesn't like, then that's when she will raise a problem, right? And it goes back to what you said, you never know what people's real intentions are. You can perceive things like, oh, it's just playful, it's nothing serious. But that person may be perceiving it like she or he is allowing me to say and do these things. So they're feeling me and vibing the way that I am, but in reality, they're not. Because hey, we got to go home. We got husbands, wives, girlfriends, whatever. And that person is like, no, like I thought we were on the same page.
Mhm.
And to bring it all full circle, like this is where speaking up and creating the foundation of having healthy boundaries, for ourselves, and having a conversation around consent comes into place, because it does not just play out in your personal life with your family, with your friends, but in work environments. And hopefully jobs are doing more trainings and things. I know that I done took so many trainings last week about this, and I'm not like annoyed with it. I love the fact that this new job I have, they do that. My last job definitely did too, but I'm over test. That's the whole point. I'm like, oh my God. But I hope more jobs and more companies are picking up and doing it, because some people just perceive to be super friendly, but they're super inappropriate. And they need to
Mhm.
know that, like, why did these feathers keep coming? What's this going on? They need to they need to respect and honor people's boundaries. And consent needs to be a thing that is like carried out in all
And to
environments.
take it a little further, just to put other things out there that may just apply to other people. Sometimes people are preyed upon, people of the same gender. You know what I mean? So it's not always going to be a man going after a woman, and a woman. It could be a man, being inappropriate with another male, and a woman being inappropriate with another woman. So it's like, you got to be able to look out for those things too, because I'm pretty sure that really affects the dynamics for how people handle those situations or don't handle those situations. You
Mhm.
know, and if it happens to be somebody in a higher position than you can from the jump be vocal and assert boundaries, but they may decide to make your life a living hell. So it's like it's so many things to consider, in that type of environment. And lastly, kind of going back to what you were just saying about somebody could be very friendly but being inappropriate, you do have a percent of people who may truly be ignorant, not be aware of how like their behavior is coming off. And even that can be hard to kind of approach somebody on, because it's like, when you kind of know somebody, you kind of like, damn, like I don't think they mean no harm, so it's like you don't want
Yeah.
to offend them, you don't want to get them in trouble per se. But at the same token, in the long run, eventually that will catch up to them. So it's like, if you are willing to maybe be that person to try to like put that person on like heads up, like, I don't think this is your intention, but this is how this is coming off. Maybe that can help somebody. And it don't mean they're even doing something, you may not be the person that they're doing anything to. It's just like, basically when you see something, hopefully you feel brave enough or like you're able to say something. Like I
Mhm.
understand it's not always comfortable to, be in certain situations and stuff like that. But it's like, I think that's a part of the problem. Too many people are too comfortable with being quiet. And I get it. Like we all got stuff going on. You don't necessarily want to jeopardize, but at the same token, if everybody's being quiet, if nobody's speaking up, speaking out, then the same thing just happens over and over. And it's just a toxic environment,
Mhm.
for everybody.
Yeah, it's like work trauma, like generate like how generational trauma goes. A lot of times generational trauma continues because people don't say anything, people cover it up and it just continues to happen and happen and happen. It's the same thing in work environments. People will cover up things and things will continue to happen because people think they're going to be able to continue getting away with it. You know, we had a keynote speaker that came a couple years ago for our inclusion and equity session that my job was having. We had it every June. Different speakers and things will come, and I can't pronounce her last name, but her first name is Lovey, and she's on social media. I follow her. I love everything about this woman, but she has a book called The Good Troublemaker, and it's for people that that are in work environments. And she was saying sometimes you have to be that good troublemaker to speak up against things that are happening in the work environment. And literally a week after she said that, maybe like 3 or 4 girls that I worked with on my team was saying how this guy in the mailroom, like we had to go in during COVID to do mail. So we would go in and go out. And like they went to go do mail. The next day he was messaging them. So you done looked up all of their names. Not only that, he friend requested them on Facebook. Mind you, it was while in the office, it was just formal conversation of like, hey, can you show me how to do X, Y, and Z? Because I've never been here before. It hadn't happened to me, but I was about to go in the office. So guess what I did? I told my boss, yes, I was speaking on behalf of the girls that came to me because they were afraid to say something. So I said something. I didn't like my boss's response because she was finding every freaking reason why the job may say that these things were okay. And I'm like, there's nothing okay about anything that he did. I
So
said, and
looking
they,
up my personal information for any reason besides your job's duty,
Mhm.
doing it without my permission, but then accessing my social,
And
Lord.
yeah, every day messaging me, even if I ignore you. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Long story short, she did report it because if she didn't, I was going to go above her head because, I'm the good troublemaker. He ended up getting terminated because it was evidently a history. No one said anything. And like when I because when I did go in, he wasn't there. And I'm like, I'm glad that he wasn't because like had she not handled him, I would have handled him myself. But
Girl.
he did get terminated because it was, I guess, when she came to me, she said, evidently this has been a thing. And I'm like, and here you go saying that, oh, like maybe he's just wanting to be friends. Like, it's none of that.
But that's still inappropriate. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's inappropriate.
I'm like, is something wrong with him? Like, and I'm not being facetious when I say that, but like, it's something cognate like not developed because there's no way that you can think that that was the right thing. But needless to say, that just goes to show, like, hey, somebody sometimes got to be that person to break that barrier. Like, hey, it didn't happen to me, but I know people that it did happen to. And somebody probably like, oh, you snitching. I don't care. Call me what you want. But before I said something to my boss about it, I asked them women who I am all still friends with to this day, do you mind if I say something? Like, if you're scared, I'm not. Like, I'm not. And they didn't they didn't care, even though like to fulfill the whole investigation, they had to like talk, but it wasn't like anything had been like really bad done besides the fact that like here's all these messages which they can clearly see, and then they had screenshots of like him messaging them on Facebook and a friend request. I'm like, bro, you are weird. Like, you're weird.
And
But
that,
yeah.
and that, and then that'll be the type of stuff that get ignored because they're like, oh, that's low level. But then it escalates to something different that nobody ever thought was going to happen. So it's like some stuff you got to nip in the bud. Like, you don't let it get that far.
And if you're a person of power, like a supervisor, manager, and that may have happened because I think my manager at the time was wondering why no one wanted, like, they didn't feel comfortable coming to her. Maybe you need to check yourself and how you respond to your employees, because I know for a fact that was part of the problem with that particular manager that we had. No one felt like they could talk to her about certain things because look, when I went to you, you said, well, maybe it's just him being friendly. And I said, do you not see all the cases of people being friendly in work? And it turns out that that woman done been killed or something like that. This, whether it's being friendly or not, something needs to be said, something needs to be done, you know? So again, when people say, whether you're in a work environment, personal friends, family, oh, we have an open door policy. What does that open door policy really consist of? Because you need to remove your judgment from that, and validate that person's experience and the things that they are saying, and then move forward with a conclusion that can, work full circle for everyone, not protecting the perpetrator. Like, because in that case, her reasonings for like not trying to go forward, it's like, well, maybe you're going to continue to protect this guy, and then look what happened. It came out that he has been doing this, like the other guy. Like, it just, stop it. Stop it. But this has been a very good conversation. What do you say?
Yeah, it's something else I wanted to bring to the table just because we didn't really touch on it, but I think it's
Mhm.
really important to touch on it, and that is physical boundaries.
Mhm.
Um, and primarily protecting and respecting people's personal space. And the reason I want to bring that up is because, like, a lot of times that's the easiest way maybe to get somebody's attention, but you have to like be aware that not everybody wants to be touched. And I'm thinking about it in a few different ways, but like specifically, I'm thinking about it like just navigating the world, if I'm walking by, do not grab my arm. Do not, you get what I'm saying? Like, that's different. Like, if you like trying to go past somebody and saying, excuse me, but I think it's important to talk about, definitely as us being women, and talking about our personal experiences and how we have probably dealt with men or like people out into the world. Once again, these are conversations that we need to have together. You know what I mean? We should be comfortable saying these things. Hopefully they can receive it. And then they should be comfortable telling us the stuff that maybe that we do. So young men, old men, because it ain't just the young
Elders.
ones. It ain't just the young ones.
Mhm.
Please be mindful of our personal space while out in public. Do not grab us, do not touch us. That is not the appropriate way to get our attention. Use your words, and even in using your words, be respectful. If I do not want to engage, we do not want to engage, go about your business.
Mhm. Yes, I agree. And do not pull up next to me in your car, because 9 out of 10, I'm gonna reach in my purse. And we don't. A lot of people have the right to carry. A lot of states, you do have the
Mhm.
right to carry, and a lot of women nowadays are walking around with things on them, whether it's a pew pew or it's some other safety gadget, because there are so many out here nowadays. So just like Jess said, for men to watch your boundaries, with women, it can go both ways for women
A
as
100%.
as well, because I think a lot of times as a woman, thinking that you can just do whatever to a man and he's not supposed to feel some type of way. And it may be things that a man likes. I know some men that like a aggressive woman for whatever reason. Everyone does not. In the same way you want your boundaries and things respected, you should be doing the same thing for that man, whether you know him or not. If it's a stranger, I listen. I want to respect your boundaries to the full extent, because I don't want a stranger to misinterpret my boundaries or do something that makes me feel uncomfortable and things like that. And not even just men respecting women's and women respecting men, but please respect children's boundaries. And please, parents, please, 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 please work on your child honoring another child's boundaries, honoring adults' boundaries in space. And work with them on creating their own boundaries that they can, and allow them to have boundaries against you as a parent, allow them to have boundaries towards other adults, and have that conversation with them. And some people may be like, oh, that's so stupid. No, it's not stupid, because again, a boundless child will allow anything. And as the parent, those things start at home. You are the foundation and the core of that child's development. They're going to school, they're going to like sporting events. Some people may let their kids go to sleepovers, which I will contest to that. But anywhere, you just want to make sure that your child is being respectful and respected,
Hmm.
because nowadays in school, these young kids are doing things to each other. And it may come off to be okay because no one has taught them that it's not okay. So I think that's a whole nother conversation for another day, but at least open up the doors of communication. I know a lot of parents that have like middle schoolers and teenagers, and they've already started talking about like, boundaries and sex and different things, abuse and all of these things. Continue. It doesn't matter if they get annoyed, continue, because they will love and respect you so much more later on in their life, when they may face these things, or they may know someone else that has faced them or facing them. And because you done instilled all these things in them, now your child may be the one helping that child through something, like I feel like
Hmm.
I feel like, that's important. And I speak on that because, I was abused as a child. And it's not that, and I've said this numerous times, it's not that my family, my mom, my grandmother, and them did not have these conversations with me, but these conversations, now that I look back at it, were not clear enough. Well, why didn't you say anything? Because this person that did this was my superior, was in a position of superiority. Like, this person I had to respect. So I thought I had to do everything that this person told me I had to do. I was afraid, like different reasons, So make sure in these conversations, whether it's with your child or another adult, you are very clear and specific. And if someone doesn't understand, hopefully you'll be able to define things in a way that they can understand, and you guys can work your way through that. But just please have these open doors of communication and have these type of conversations.
Yes, definitely. Between the genders, with your loved ones, with your friends, with your significant others, across the board, these things have, and with yourself. I think
Mhm.
that's important. I think a lot of times why the reason why we don't speak up about certain things because we ourselves aren't settled on something or aren't comfortable with something. So it's like you got to get your own self to a place of understanding and comfortability about what you do and don't like and do and don't want to be able to like confidently speak on it to other people as far as asserting your boundaries and consent and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Yeah, because trust and believe me, if you have a boundary and the person that, whatever, if you're dating or they don't like it, trust and believe me, there's someone out there that will respect it and that will like you 10 times more. You don't have to go the overarching point of where you are coming outside of yourself. Because me, like thinking back to like the moments when I took my walls down and did things that I really didn't want to do or whatever, I didn't feel like it was me doing it. Like, I didn't feel like feel like I was a kinda like an outer body experience. And sometimes when I think back now, it's just like, yeah, some aspects are really like, a hard pill to swallow. But moving forward, I know that I know how to stand firm in my boundaries. Um, and clearly I know how to communicate things, even if a person is acting like they ain't understand understand it, but never feel pressured. But never feel pressured. And if you do, maybe that it's time for you to like be more specific and have, conversations with that person. Period.
It's like, or remove yourself from the situation because at the end of the day, nobody is entitled to anybody else under any circumstance. And
Mhm.
it may sound corny, but maybe you got to develop some code words and code phrases with you and your loved ones.
Mhm. Yes, definitely. So, I hope this conversation resonated with someone, or you guys that are listening will pass this on, because I feel like we gave some really valuable information. And a lot of these things were from our personal experiences or just things that we see. So I think that makes it matter more. They're like, oh, someone in the flesh really has dealt with this, and here's how they have moved forward to not only develop more safety measures around their own life and the people that they love, but also are pouring these things out to other people. So hopefully you guys share this with someone and you know this conversation may resonate. Thank you, Jessica, for all of your wonderful insight on this topic. Is there any final words?
That's it. I hope people just open up and communicate. It's about time. It's been time, but it's really time.
Yes, and be safe because there's so much going on in social media in the world. And unfortunately, we may not can prevent some things from happening, but by being alert, vigilant, and educating ourselves, we can prevent a lot. But again, thank you guys for joining us for this episode. If you are not following me on social media, please go tap in with me at Chronicles of a Virgo Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Come subscribe to the channel. If you would like to connect or talk to me, reach out to me, Chronicles of Virgo 22 at gmail.com. Just be patient in my response, okay? Because life has been life in the professional world, but I'm getting back on track with things. All right. Um, and yes, I again hope you guys really took something from this conversation and use it to, educate your loved ones, your friends, family, whomever, but also take a look at your own life and try to understand if there are things that you may can do better or things that maybe you need to stop doing. Okay. And until next time, good people, take care of yourselves, but most importantly, each other. Peace out.